Thanks for watching my video on my adventure to Southern California and my introduction to adventure with RawHyde Adventures. It started off with Storm Leo in Southern California. So much for the beautiful weather. So showed up and saw the amazing ranch, but it was soaking wet and everything was muddy, so I guess it was going to be a real adventure. That first evening we got a warm welcome from Jim and the team, and telling us what we could expect on our first day of adventure. Here we see my CSC RX3 in a sea of beamers. One of the first things we learned was a valuable lesson of picking up our bikes. We then headed down the ranch road for our first instructions on the bike. And as if on cue, we had our first set of domino crashes and our first practical use of picking up the bikes. Everything was done with teamwork, nobody had a strained back, and we all had a good laugh and honked our horns. Much of the training was focused on going slow and working on things like balance, weighting, counterweighting, counter steering, brake, clutch, throttle, all the basics of riding a motorcycle, but doing it off-road. Here in our first drill, we're figuring out, standing up and then doing things like, lifting one leg off the peg, sticking out, seeing what that does with your balance and how the bike responds. This grew into other drills that got more complex along the way. I ran a couple cameras on my bike, so here you can see from the reverse what my teammates are doing, maybe a better view of sticking our feet out and working on our balance. We started getting a bit more fancy by putting our knee up on the back of our saddle and then switching, figuring out that kind of balance. And finally, this went to swinging our leg completely over the bike and all the way back. So we had one side of our body completely over the bike and still able to control the bike fully without having access to the rear brake at that point. So with our newfound slow bike skills, we headed for the dirt and ran around a little circuit course, going as slow as we can while standing up. There were some ruts, there's some bumps, there's some uphill, some downhill, and all this just trying to creep and creep and creep. Now that we've got these slow skills down, it was time to work on throttle, clutch, and brake control. So here we were heading out and we were doing what's called trail braking. So we were standing up, riding the bike, getting up to a speed, and braking to a full halt without putting our feet down and accelerating off. So things like peeking over the top of a hill. Great skill to learn. We then worked on things like just slamming on our front brake to see what that felt like, that loss of control, the bike diving forward and just about skidding out. Of course, releasing before we crashed. We then advanced onto that and we started doing things like just sliding our rear brake and having a lot of fun with that. In fact, we got to play with that for quite some time. And then finally going to full stops hard with front and rear brake, feeling the control, feeling the bike wiggle around, but being certain in our control and getting used to just letting the bike move underneath you and not panicking and stiffening up. We started having more and more fun with our skidding drills, going faster and faster. In fact, I feel sorry for the fact that I roosted somebody off the line who was waiting in line behind me to do the same drills. But tons of fun, felt like a little kid again. Here I'm getting some bike love.
It's a fun little bike, man.
It's amazing.
I saw it one in the Long Beach motorcycle show, and I just never really, I saw it, and then I got distracted and went somewhere else. I never really looked at one up close or saw it, you know, obviously how it rides. But
yeah, well, if you want to try it out, let me know.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
When he gets over here,
Now we moved on to the tougher drills, and that was weaving through cones, starting out with them being just straight in front, doing some basic, very simple counterweighting, foot position on the peg, and getting through this. And as we got better and better at this, then we moved up to some more difficult elements of our weave. So here we've got the cones have been moved apart, and we're really having to do some serious counterweighting to be able to get the bike around these cones. We're not like the advanced class where they're going to skid their bikes around the corner. Again, everything was based on slow and using balance.
I did that for you.
And as you'll see here, clutch and throttle control sometimes fails as a new student, and we get to lay down those pretty bikes. Good news is everybody's nice. We help each other out, got the bike turned off, and we worked as a team to get it picked up. Then we reversed our course, which was more difficult because this was downhill approach, so it forced us to focus more on the rear brake, which is one of the big things that I wanted to learn. I am terrible at that. I seem to use it as an on-off switch, so it's either not used or I'm skidding. So this helped a lot.
there you go. Good shit. That should be outside.
So we took a little break and we hauled ass down the highway to this little dead end and decided to have a slow race. So he broke us up into a couple groups and we lined up and off we went, riding our bikes as slow as possible. Group 1 had its winner, Group 2 had their winner, and then we had a championship runoff. I happened to win the second heat, but I got my butt kicked in the finale. Then when we got back from our slow race, we found that we had what I would say by far was our toughest drills, and that was doing figure eights within the box. And the goal was to stay inside the orange cones and keep doing figure eights and not put your foot down, not sit down. And some of the guys were great. I had a hell of a time. It took me a while before I could get this together. And everybody got their chance to do it. You know, not everybody was 100% successful. There were some bike tumbles, some stalls, some foot downs, and some frustration. But by the end, everybody was doing fantastic.
That's a little tight.
As we see here, one of our riders who had been doing an amazingly great job, super tight turns, just couldn't believe what he was doing here. You know, he just took it a little too far here and planted the bike on the ground and got to go for a run. And the fact that most of our instructors were police officers, they had a good laugh at his expense, being that he was a hose monkey, as they were calling him, firefighter. And it was one of the craziest things that happened is they put two of us into the arena to do figure eights together. During my run here in the orange, they decided, two of the instructors, to jump in, and we had 4 in the arena, which meant we had to watch our speed and all that, so we didn't crash into each other through our figure eights. so that this didn't become some kind of derby. And they had said that this was the only time they'd ever had 4 people in here. So it was 4 man in the octagon, 1 man leave. It was a ton of fun and a wee bit challenging, to say the least. So that night we met in the bar, had some drinks, ate some food, and talked about our highs and lows of the day. And I think everybody had a really good sleep that night because we were bushed. So the next morning, getting ready for our instruction, the weather was horrendous. In fact, so bad that we really couldn't do instruction at RawHyde Ranch. The terrain there just couldn't handle the soaking they got. There was just terrible, terrible mud, and it just wouldn't work. So they decided to gather us up down at the highway, and we boogied 20 minutes or so down the freeway, down I-5, and went to a local ORV park to do our work there. So we arrived at the ORV park, and the ranger was pretty surprised that anybody was showing up on this day on motorcycles. So we pretty much had the place to ourselves. And then we rallied up at this little hooch with a cover on it, and from there we got cut loose to do our riding. And as we were getting ready to do that, another ranger came up and told us where we couldn't go, since we had kind of staged over in the 4x4 area. But from there we just headed out, and it was super muddy. There was stream crossings, which I don't think were normally streams. There were lots of whoop-de-doos, and there were some areas where instead of it being like sand, it was more like clay and super sketch. And we just ran around for, I don't know, hour, 2 hours, I don't know what it was, because we just had a blast booking around in there, and trail turns and braking, and just really kind of playing with everything we'd learned the day before. So as we wrapped up playing in the mud, we rallied back up at the hooch and headed back to RawHyde, got ourselves cleaned up because we were soaking wet. Most of these guys were freezing. I was one of the few people that had heated gear with me because everybody expected Southern California to be beautiful. And after we got cleaned up, it was time to hit the open bar, and it was time for our ceremony to get our certificates from Jim Hyde for our graduation from our Introduction to Adventure. Got to say I had a great time. Would have loved better weather. Would have loved to have more instruction on day 2. We'll see if we can't fill that in sometime in the near future. So hope you enjoyed it, and for those who were there, I hope it brings back some good memories.